How can our listeners identify when they are reaching or when they have reached burnout?
I don't know exactly where you used to be, only you know that, but what I'm most interested in my coaching practice is where are you now and how does that compare and contrast to where you used to be? So I want to know what's the best version of you and how far off you are today to that version. That's what I want to know. And that can lead to very interesting conversation. So if you're listening to us today and thinking, ooh, that's a little uncomfortable, I can notice some shifts in my behavior, that's a telltale sign.
Welcome to On Record PR. I'm the executive producer and guest host, Jennifer Simpson Carr. Today, I'm going on record with Charlène Gisèle, a high-performance coach for lawyers, law firms, and executives. Charlène is an award-winning keynote speaker and has built an international reputation as the Burnout Prevention Advisor, which has earned her global invitations to speak at the most prestigious stages, law firms, and financial services institutions. Charlène is known for her ability to inspire, engage, entertain, and leave her audiences with strategies to maximize and sustain high performance. She is a master NLP coach, Burnout Advisor to the leading organization who founded a unique Burnout Blueprint method. She specializes in empowering individuals and businesses to maximize their sustainable potential by optimizing wellness, building resilience, and optimizing performance. Charlène was featured in many publications and has also appeared on various podcast shows where she has shared valuable insights and strategies on topics such as biohacking, high performance, burnout prevention, and recovery. Charlène, welcome to the show.
Thank you for such a warm introduction, Jennifer. I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
Yes, as we were just talking about before we hit record, we're both very excited for this conversation. I know that you are a former practicing attorney who has now transitioned to really helping attorneys and other high-performing professionals on their well-being.
Absolutely. And I find that when we pursue a high-achieving career, well-being is often the one thing that we neglect. I can say that I'm guilty of that, and I know a lot of my peers have found themselves guilty of that. And my mission statement was really to bridge the gap between the low, high performance and well-being and wellness.
And I'm so happy to hear that because I started in the legal profession almost 15 years ago, and we know it's historically known for high demand, long working hours, intense pressure, all of which contribute to mental health challenges. And for many years, that wasn't addressed. And so I've seen since I started years ago that there has been a positive shift in growing acknowledgement of these issues and also more open conversations about how we can focus on, as you said, something that is often put on the back burner. So let's dive right in. What is the difference between burnout and stress?
That is such a good question. I'm so glad that you've asked. Stress is a component of burnout, but it's a part of the equation. First of all, can I take a step back and go even further in the definition and maybe start off with what is stress, right? So that we can distinguish between stress and burnout. I believe, overuse the word stress. And actually, when we say stress, like I'm super stressed, I'm really stressed out right now, right? That's relatable. What we mean is we have a lot of stressors. But of course, no one really says that. And it's important to distinguish between stressors and stress. Stressors is the workload. It's your deadline. It's your cat or your dog being sick. It's your children coughing at night. Is, all the things that you have to do at work, your billing targets, your KPI. It's all the things that are happening in your ecosystem in life and at work. And they can be neutral events, or they can be very triggering events. Your interpretation of that event is going to cause a reaction within your body, within your stress level, and that is stress. So it's the reaction to the stressors that would create a physiological response. For some of us, it might be, I feel a headache when I get stressed. For some of us, maybe I get sweaty palms or my heart is beating fast. For some of my clients, I feel like I have an anxiety and I can't breathe anymore. That's your physiological response. And then you get a choice. You get a decision as to how you're going to respond or deal with that stress. 99% of the time, what we do is we think that if we tend to the stressors, that will resolve the stress. But actually, that's bypassing, because the stress, as we just discovered, is our body expressing a need. It's a physiological response. So even if you complete your deadline, even if you do your workload, you might still feel that anxiety within your body. And if you don't resolve that anxiety for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and it piles up and it becomes chronic, that's when you get chronic stress or chronic anxiety, and you have an increasing amount of workload, but a decreasing amount of resources to cope with that stress, that's when you burn out.
That's such a fascinating description of how stressors really impact, because as you were saying, the results of the stress, I was thinking, oh, that happens to me. My heart starts to beat quickly, my hand. So there are things that we can be looking for, it sounds like, that can really give us an indication that the stress is starting to build up. Did I hear you correctly in that?
You got it. You're spot on. But often we just ignore that, right? We ignore the signs and symptoms. So, as you just shared something personal, I feel like I should, disclose a bit of personal information as well. And for me, stress in my body was lack of sleep. At the height of my anxiety, I was diagnosed with chronic insomnia, and I couldn't really attribute it to anything in particular. I just thought, well, I have a lot of stress, I have a lot of work, and I don't have a lot of time to sleep. But the truth is, for years and years and years, I neglected any kind of physiological rhythm. And I thought, sleep. Well, who has time for that, right? Mm-hmm. I better be making sure that I nail my KPIs and my billing target instead. The problem with these strategies, of course, is they may work in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe 20 years if you're lucky. But eventually, the body really keeps the score and you're going to pay the price. For some of us, we have very resilient bodies. So it may be that actually what pays the price is your relationship. So then you're navigating a divorce, which also happened to me. And for some people, it may be another aspect of your life, like a diagnosis, like you might have a chronic condition because of the result of the bottling up of this unresolved stress.
So as we are thinking about goals for 2024, the listeners of our show are thinking, okay, this sounds like something I deal with, and maybe it sounds like something I address. Can you share the most common challenges that you hear from top performing professionals, in high intense positions, and how you address that in your coaching for them?
Number one objection is, I don't have time. I don't have time. I have so much work. Probably the number one word that I hear most often in my practice is, but I'm so busy, right? And so what we do is we go into this loop. And when I say we, I very much include myself, because before I got coached and before I became a professional coach, I very much went into this narrative whereby to save time, I sacrifice anything to do with well-being because it's fluffy, it's sentimental, it's not necessary, and I'll sort it out later, right? It's that mindset of pushing everything else to the side. And if our listeners are listening and thinking, well, I have goals for 2024, I'm afraid I might burst a bubble here, but goals are only as good as systems in your life. How many of us have goals, but actually those goals don't get completed? Why is that? It's not because you don't have willpower. It's not because you don't have motivation. It's just that these things, goal, motivation, willpower, they don't stick. It's like a Teflon pan, right? You get it on the first of the new year. You just get really excited. You've got your new shiny goals and intentions and resolution, but it doesn't stick. And it doesn't stick because you don't have a system. So what I would say to our audience is, instead of having 10 goals, pick 3. But for each of those 3 goals, Pick a system that is going to support it. What is a good example of a system? Scheduling. So again, this is the antidote to the objection of time. If the objection is, I don't have time, I would say, okay, so we're going to start by an audit. We're going to audit how you spend your time, because we all have the same amount of time. We all have 24 hours. Are we really intentional? How many minutes go wasted? I'll give you a quick example, Jennifer. I get clients that say, oh, I don't waste time. No, I'm just super busy. And then I go and I dig out and say, well, let me see your data on your social media usage. And then we find staggering amount of minutes at lunchtime. So you don't have time to go for a walk. You don't have time to do a breathing exercise. You don't have time to meditate, but you have time to spend X amount of minutes on X amount of platform. So you do have time. You just choose not to spend the time that meets your goal. And there you have it, right? So it has to come from a place of brutal honesty, because I genuinely believe that we all have time. We just choose to allocate it in different ways.
That is such fantastic advice. And what I'm hearing you say is, I love the word audit, really opening yourself up to be honest with what you're choosing to spend time on. And then what I'm hearing from you is being intentional about the next time you have a choice to, as you use as an example, scroll on social media or take a 5-minute walk, to choose the walk. And that's such fantastic advice. I'm already starting to think about ways that I can take a look at what I'm doing in the evenings or perhaps when I'm making lunch and make some more intentional decisions. Charlène, let's pause here to hear a message from our sponsor.
This episode is sponsored by Furia Ruble Communications. In the ever-changing business ecosystem, it's crucial for law firms and businesses to maintain a focus on innovation, differentiation, and efficiency to sustain their relevance and competitive edge. Furia Ruble's Stride services equips domestic and international law firms and businesses to pinpoint obstacles and inefficiencies, distinguish true unique selling propositions, optimize processes, and adjust to shifting client requirements. To learn more about Furia Ruble's Stride services, visit furiaruble.com/stride.
So did you have a pivotal moment in your career where you really thought that there was an opportunity to help lawyers and legal professionals with your experience as a lawyer, now with burnout and stress and mental health?
There was definitely a pivotal moment, and I hope it's not either too sad or too bleak for our audience, but I feel like I have to be really candid here. It was the moment when my father, who was my inspiration to become a lawyer, actually had a burnout-induced heart attack and a stroke. And I'm really pleased to say that he's actually survived it. But when it happened, his life was on hold for a moment. We did not know that he would survive it. It was very, very serious. And I'm so grateful that he had a successful surgery. But beyond the surgery, what really shifted the needle for him and what enabled him to make a full recovery was the lifestyle change that he adopted. He was someone that was really stressed, a workaholic, a type A++++, starred plus.
Mm-hmm.
And he hasn't stopped working after this heart attack, but he started to shift his mindset. He started to integrate mindfulness into his life. He started to go back to the passions that he had before he sacrificed them all in the name of work. If I give you a quick example, he's someone who used to love going for fishing adventures at the weekend. And then when he started his career and he wanted to be, the provider and the father and the amazing professional that he was, he sacrificed a lot of his hobbies and worked, and really didn't take a lot of care for his mindfulness and his physical health. And it was shocking for us as a family to see the impact that unmanaged stress can have on someone, where actually their life becomes at stake. And I'm so grateful that I can tell this story and that the story does have a happy ending, because I did coach him to make sure that he would recover. And now I see his life now and his life before. And we all said that actually this heart attack was a blessing in a way, because it taught us all a lesson of sustainability in the way that we work.
Thank you so much for sharing such a personal story with us. We try to have very candid and open and intentional conversations. I really appreciate you being so candid, and I'm so happy that your father has recovered and that he did find a way to bring some of that joy and his passions and mindfulness back into his life. It does make me think of something that you said earlier. You used the word busy a few times, and I feel like in high demanding professions, and particularly legal, busy can be the word that people feel like puts a value on how well they're doing or how successful they are. And with no ill intent, but just I feel like in conversations, oftentimes we will say, how are you doing? Or how are things going? And the answer is busy. How do you talk to the professionals that you coach about the narrative around busy? And do you help them identify language that helps them feel like they're successful and valued and doing great things without having to qualify it with a word like busy?
It's a really good question. And I was smiling as you were asking it, because I thought, have you met my client? Just if you'll allow me to entertain you with a story, just as you said what you said, I thought, this is really sounds like you were with me that day. Just a few weeks ago, I was coaching one of my clients who's a powerhouse in the legal industry. And she was actually quite famous at the firm for having a reputation of being that person that would say busy every time you ask, how are you? Right? It was busy, busy, busy. And it became a bit of a thing that people would say about her. Not with disrespect, of course. She was highly respected, but a bit of a trademark. And I did ask her when we started our coaching journey, and how are you? And of course, she pulled that trick with me, busy. And I actually asked her the question 5 times, and she said busy. And I said, and what else? Well, so busy. And it was even busy and busier every time. It was busy. And then on the 6th time, she burst out into tears. Because you see, behind that status, busy, was the lot of pain, of struggle, of fears, of anxiety, of not knowing where to go next, of overwhelm, of worry loops, of am I enough? Am I doing enough? I could have done it differently. I should have done that differently. And then when we opened up this pain and actually allowed for the reality to be seen, well, there was a lot to be said. And there was a lot of sadness behind this busyness. But we don't often have those safe spaces, especially as high-powered professionals that have a reputation to maintain and clients to serve. And we want to do it at the highest level. And we're very intentional. And we really are busy. Then when do we have time to reflect on what's really going on inside our mind and bodies? And very often we don't. And yes, you could say that that particular client was perhaps guilty of being accustomed to saying busy, but aren't we all guilty also of not really wanting to know how the person is doing? Because truly, when somebody is saying busy, we're used to that. So we okay it. We are as responsible when we hear busy and accept that as an answer as the person who is saying I'm busy is. It's a 50-50 relationship, because if we start to be in a society or in a company when I ask you, how are you? And you tell me overwhelmed, oh, that's a bit uncomfortable, isn't it? we can't quite cope with that. So instead, we're busy because it's just a bit more comfortable and more socially accepted.
So it sounds like there's some ownership on those asking to follow up when they hear questions like that. There is responsibility maybe as colleagues to say, but how are you really doing? Because from the example you gave, it sounds like that's really a mask for a lot more that someone's dealing with and maybe suppressing.
You're spot on, Jennifer. It's the veneer of performance. It's the performance mask. And it's only human to put that mask on because we have to in many ways, right? Because you do have to show up to your peers, to your colleagues, to your client in the best possible professional light, right? So we can't, listen to this conversation today and go into self-blame mode, but perhaps more of a invitation to reflect on how we can subtly change our habits around how we lead and receive conversation. So a practical tip, and one that I give when I do leadership training at law firms and other organizations, is if you are in a leadership position and you have a team member that is due a one-on-one or a performance review with you or a catch-up, really ask them to define how they are by using feeling terms. So just see if they can share any feelings with you. And I know that can be a bit uncomfortable because there is still a presumption that emotions don't live in the office and we have to get rid of them. But we know, and science has shown, that emotions are with us at all time, right? So if you can have those reflective conversations with your team and normalize the time where people can open up, that means that they can also open up the great stuff. So an example that I like to give to the leaders that I work with is, I'm not just saying to be there for the hard time, but actually encourage your team to tell you when they're super excited, when they're over the moon because something just happened, and actually be the leader that encourages this positive language around the office. Sometimes neutral is not good enough. Like, be that leader that is eliciting excitement and motivation, and actually start to use that language. So a little homework that I give to a lot of people that I coach is, next time somebody asks you and how you're feeling about this project, say, terrific, I'm so excited, I have a very clear vision, I know where we're heading, and use these very positive words, because that will motivate your team. You're giving them a compass, a North Star. And I think we can all say that we often don't do that.
I love that advice. And it's true. Our language has such power, and the inflection in our voice has such power. And also the confidence you build by saying, I love the example you gave. I feel terrific about it, but also I'm really clear on where we're going. I mean, what kind of confidence that must give your teammates that, wow, he or she is on a mission and they know where we're going next. I love that. Thank you for sharing that tip.
Oh.
So I'd love to know, we've talked about stress and burnout. How can, and you gave some physiological examples, how can our listeners identify when they are reaching or when they have reached burnout? And what tips do you give to the individuals that you coach on what to do when they recognize that experience or those triggers happening?
That is such a great question. The first thing I would say is to look at your behaviors. Typically, we can lie to ourselves, but our behaviors don't lie. What do I mean by that? Are you someone that used to drink one glass of wine 3 times a week and now is drinking half a bottle every night after work as a relaxation tool? Are you someone that used to cook fairly healthy meals, perhaps not every day, but most day, and had fairly healthy lunches, and is now pressing whatever delivery, whatever medium that you have, and is having comfort food or that pizza, whatever is comfort food to you, depending on your culture and your preferences, but something that we all know or could qualify as not particularly healthy? Are you someone that used to play the guitar on a Saturday and call your friends for a walk or an art class or golfing or dancing or whatever it is that you love to do, and now is spending Saturday crashing on your sofa, completely depleted, completely drained out, no energy and no desire to see anyone, talk to anyone, or do anything? So you see the picture that I'm painting here, Jennifer, is a shift. I don't know exactly where you used to be, only you know that, but what I'm most interested in my coaching practice is where are you now and how does that compare and contrast to where you used to be? So I want to know what's the best version of you and how far off you are today to that version. That's what I want to know. And that can lead to very interesting conversation. So if you're listening to us today and thinking, ooh, that's a little uncomfortable, I can notice some shifts in my behavior, that's a telltale sign.
So those are fantastic. And again, it sounds like really being intentional and auditing yourself on where you are in each moment in time. What steps would you advise a professional to take if they realize that they are, as you said, they've had a significant change in habit, or they're realizing that they've really strayed pretty far from the best version of their self, and it's an indication that they may be burnt out in some way?
I would say first step is brutal honesty. It can be really tempting to go for the let me not address this and I will get to it when, and I will get to it if. Those are very dangerous conversations to have in your head. So I would say actually address it now. If you have a feeling that you're heading somewhere you don't want to go, just catch yourself before you're fully there, because it will be easier to course correct than if you've already crashed and burned. You can still completely recover. I'm a prime example. I had a pretty major crash and burn episode, and I made a full recovery, and so has my father. But still, if you're listening and you're thinking, oh, I'm heading there, preventative measures are always better than cure. So don't wait for the massively ugly crash and burn episode. Start to see the uncomfortable feelings evolve and do something then. And a tool to help you do that is to accept that we all need support. We all really do. And you might have a wonderful spouse, a wife, a partner, a husband, a friend, a community, whatever your support system looks like. But I would argue that even if you have the most supportive significant other, friends, colleagues, you actually need someone that is not emotionally involved with you. And that's why counseling, coaching, AA for some people, whatever community, whatever group, whatever advisor. For me, I'm a burnout advisor, I'm a burnout coach, I'm a high-performing coach. The reason that helps more sometimes or more effectively is because I don't have emotional entanglement with my clients. I'm a completely neutral person that can just listen with no judgment, that doesn't have any vetted interest one way or another, and that can just be completely sympathetic and compassionate to the situation at hand and give strategic advice and implementable action plans in the most objective way. And I think that's invaluable. I really do attribute a lot of my success and my recovery to the wonderful work that my coaches did for me. And sometimes that can make the difference between thriving and struggling, admitting the fact that you might need to seek external help. And to me, it doesn't matter whether you go to a counselor or a therapist or a coach. Some people go to a priest, right? And I mean this with all my heart. Like the whole principle behind confessions was the fact that you were seeking somebody's external advice, or at least have a way to release the things that you were feeling externally. So whatever it may be in your life, a coach, a priest, a therapist, just have someone neutral and objective that can give you guidance.
That's wonderful advice. And I'm so grateful that you shared that with me and with our listeners. And I am certain that anyone listening to this episode will have taken away some wonderful guidance and practical tips to implement even into their day-to-day lives. I know that I have, and I'm going to be very intentional about looking at particularly my use on my phone now that we've had this conversation, because I am thinking of ways that I can integrate maybe some better choices for myself that have maybe been pushed to the side recently. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today on the show. If our listeners would like to get in touch with you or learn more about you or your services, where can they find you?
Thank you for asking. LinkedIn is, I would say, the social media where I spend most of my time. So just drop me a little message on Charlène Gisèle and you will find a lot of information. And I'm also launching my podcast, the Charlène Gisèle Show, where I give a lot of advice on how to recover or prevent burnout. So you're very welcome to listen to that.
Wonderful. And we will link to both of those places in the show notes on our website. So I encourage our listeners to check that out. I want to thank our guests, again, our listeners, for listening to On Record PR. I encourage them to visit our website at onrecordpr.com, subscribe to the show, share it with your friends and colleagues. Charlène, thank you again, and we wish everyone a great day.
Thank you.
On Record PR is produced by Jennifer Simpson Carr and Matt Henderson, with support from the team at Furia Rubel Communications. This episode is edited by Željko Tomic of Compost Media Flow.